Chapter 113. The Forge. With matted beard and swathed in a bristling sharkskin apron about midday, Perth was standing between his forge and anvil, the latter placed upon an ironwood log, with one hand holding a pike head in the coals, and with the other at his forge's lungs, when Captain Ahab came along, carrying in his hand a small, rusty-looking leathern bag. While yet a little distance from the forge, moody Ahab paused, till at last Perth, withdrawing his iron from the fire, began hammering it upon the anvil, the red mass sending off the sparks in thick, hovering flights, some of which flew close to Ahab. "Are these thy mother carries chickens, Perth? They are always flying in thy wake. Birds of good omen too, but not to all. Look here, they burn. But thou livest amongst them without a scorch." "Because I am scorched all over, Captain Ahab," answered Perth, resting for a moment on his hammer. "I am past scorching. Not easily canst thou scorch a scar. Well, no more. Thy shrunk voice sounds too calmly, sanely woeful to me. In no paradise myself, I am impatient of all misery in others that is not mad. Thou shouldst go mad, blacksmith. Say, why dost thou not go mad? How canst thou endure without being mad? Do the heavens yet hate thee, that thou canst not go mad? What wert thou making there?" "Welding an old pike head, sir. There were seams and dents in it." "And canst thou make it all smooth again, blacksmith, after such hard usage as it had?" "I think so, sir." "And I suppose thou canst smooth almost any seams and dents, never mind how hard the metal, blacksmith?" "Aye, sir, I think I can, all seams and dents but one." "Look ye here, then," cried Ahab, passionately advancing and leaning with both hands on Perth's shoulders. "Look ye here. Here! Can ye smooth out a seam like this, blacksmith?" sweeping one hand across his ribbed brow. "If thou couldst, blacksmith, glad enough would I lay my head upon thy anvil, and feel thy heaviest hammer between my eyes. Answer! Canst thou smooth this seam?" "Oh, that is the one, sir." "Said I, all seams and dents but one." "Aye, blacksmith, it is the one. Aye, man, it is unsmoothable. For though thou only seest it here in my flesh, it has worked down into the bone of my skull. That is all wrinkles. But away with child's play. No more gaffs and pikes today. Look ye here," jingling the leathern bag as if it were full of gold coins. "I too want a harpoon made, one that 1,000 yoke of fiends could not part, Perth. Something that will stick in a whale like his own fin bone. There's the stuff," flinging the pouch upon the anvil. "Look ye, blacksmith, these are the gathered nail stubs of the steel shoes of racing horses." Horseshoe stubs, sir? Why, Captain Ahab, thou hast here, then, the best and stubbornest stuff we blacksmiths ever work. "I know it, old man. These stubs will weld together like glue from the melted bones of murderers. Quick, forge me the harpoon, and forge me first 12 rods for its shank, then wind and twist and hammer these 12 together like the yarns and strands of a tow line. Quick, I'll blow the fire." When at last the 12 rods were made, Ahab tried them one by spiraling them with his own hand round a long, heavy iron bolt. A flaw, rejecting the last one. "Work that over again, Perth." This done, Perth was about to begin welding the 12 into one, when Ahab stayed his hand. He said he would weld his own iron. As then, with regular gasping hems, he hammered on the anvil, Perth passing to him the glowing rods, one after the other, and the hard-pressed forge shooting up its intense straight flame, the Parsee passed silently, and bowing his head over the fire, seemed invoking some curse or some blessing on the toil. But as Ahab looked up, he slid aside. "What's that bunch of lucifers dodging about there for?" muttered Stubb, looking on from the forecastle. "That Parsee smells fire like a fusee, and smells of it himself like a hot musket's powder pan." At last the shank, in one complete rod, received its final heat, and as Perth, to temper it, plunged it all hissing into the cask of water nearby, the scalding steam shot up into Ahab's bent face. "Was thou brand me, Perth?" wincing for a moment with the pain. "Have I been forging my own branding iron, then?" "Pray God, not that. Yet I fear something, Captain Ahab. Is not this harpoon for the white whale, for the white fiend? But now for the barbs. Thou must make them thyself, man. Here are my razors, the best of steel. Here, and make the barbs sharp as the needle sleet of the icy sea." For a moment the old blacksmith eyed the razors as though he would fain not use them. "Take them, man. I have no need for them, for I now neither shave, sup, nor pray till— But here, To work! Fashioned at last into an arrowy shape, and welded by Perth to the shank, the steel soon pointed the end of the iron, and as the blacksmith was about giving the barbs their final heat, prior to tempering them, he cried to Ahab to place the water cask near. No, no, no water for that. I want it of the true death temper. Ahoy there! Tashtego, Queequeg, Dago, what say ye, pagans? Will ye give me as much blood as will cover this barb? Holding it up high. The cluster of dark nods replied, yes. 3 punctures were made in the heathen flesh, and the white whale's barbs were then tempered. Ego non baptizo te in nomine Patris, sed in nomine Diaboli, deliriously howled Ahab, as the malignant iron scorchingly devoured the baptismal blood. Now mustering the spare poles from below, and selecting one of hickory, with the bark still investing it, Ahab fitted the end to the socket of the iron. A coil of new tow-line was then unwound, and some fathoms of it taken to the windlass, and stretched to a great tension. Pressing his foot upon it till the rope hummed like a harp string, then eagerly bending over it, and seeing no strandings, Ahab exclaimed, Good! And now for the seizings. At one extremity the rope was unstranded, and the separate spread yarns were all braided and woven round the socket of the harpoon. The rope was then driven hard up into the socket. From the lower end the rope was traced halfway along the pole's length, and firmly secured so, with the intertwisting of twine. This done, pole, iron, and rope, like the 3 fates, remained inseparable, and Ahab moodily stalked away with the weapon, the sound of his ivory leg, and the sound of the hickory pole, both hollowly ringing along every plank. But ere he entered his cabin, light, unnatural, half-bantering, yet most piteous sound was heard. O Pip, thy wretched laugh, thy idle but unresting eye, all thy strange mummeries not unmeaningly blended with the black tragedy of the melancholy ship, and mocked it.
Moby-Dick, Chapter 114, The Gilder. Penetrating further and further into the heart of the Japanese cruising ground, the Pequod was soon all astir in the fishery, often in mild, pleasant weather for 12, 15, 18, and 20 hours on the stretch. They were engaged in the boats and steadily pulling or sailing or paddling after the whales, or for an interlude of 60 or 70 minutes calmly awaiting their uprising, though with but small success for their pains. At such times, under an unabated sun, afloat all day upon smooth, slow-heaving swells, seated in his boat, light as a birch canoe, and so sociably mixing with the soft waves themselves that like hearthstone cats they purr against the gunwale. These are the times of dreamy quietude, when beholding the tranquil beauty and brilliancy of the ocean's skin, one forgets the tiger heart that pants beneath it, and would not willingly remember that this velvet paw but conceals a remorseless fang. These are the times when in his whaleboat the rover softly feels a certain filial, confident, land-like feeling towards the sea, that he regards it as so much flowery earth, and the distant ship, revealing only the tops of her masts, seems struggling forward not through high rolling waves, but through the tall grass of a rolling prairie, as when the western emigrants' horses only show their erected ears while their hidden bodies widely wade through the amazing verdure. The long-drawn virgin vales, the mild blue hillsides, as over these there steals the hush, the hum. You almost swear that play-wearied children lie sleeping in these solitudes in some glad Maytime when the flowers of the woods are plucked, and all this mixes with your most mystic mood, so that fact and fancy, halfway meeting, interpenetrate, and form one seamless whole. Nor did such soothing scenes, however temporary, fail of at least as temporary an effect on Ahab. But if these secret golden keys did seem to open in him his own secret golden treasuries, yet did his breath upon them prove but tarnishing. O grassy glades, O ever-endless landscapes in the soul, in ye, though long parched by the dead drought of the earthy life, In ye men yet may roll like young horses in new morning clover, and for some few fleeting moments feel the cool dew of the life immortal on them. Would to God these blessed calms would last, but the mingling threads of life are woven by warp and woof, calms crossed by storms, a storm for every calm. There is no steady, unretracing progress in this life. We do not advance through fixed gradations and at the last one pause, through infancy's unconscious spell, boyhood's thoughtless faith, adolescence doubt, the common doom, then skepticism, then disbelief, resting at last in manhood's pondering repose of if. But once gone through, we trace the round again, and are infants, boys, and men, and ifs eternally. Where lies the final harbor whence we unmoor no more? In what rapt ether sails the world, of which the weariest will never weary? Where is the foundling's father hidden? Our souls are like those orphans whose unwedded mothers die in bearing them. The secret of our paternity lies in their grave, and we must there to learn it. And that same day, too, gazing far down from his boat's side into that same golden sea, Starbuck lowly murmured, loveliness unfathomable as ever lover saw in his young bride's eye. Tell me not of thy teeth-tiered sharks and thy kidnapping cannibal ways. Let faith oust fact, let fancy oust memory. I look deep down and do believe. And Stubb, fish-like, with sparkling scales, leaped up in that same golden light. I am Stubb, and Stubb has his history, but here Stubb takes oath that he has always been jolly.
Chapter 115, The Pequod Meets the Bachelor. And jolly enough were the sights and the sounds that came bearing down before the wind, some few weeks after Ahab's harpoon had been welded. It was a Nantucket ship, the Bachelor, which had just wedged in her last cask of oil and bolted down her bursting hatches, and now, in glad holiday apparel, was joyously, though somewhat vaingloriously, sailing around among the widely separated ships on the ground, previous to pointing her prow for home. The three men at her masthead wore long streamers of narrow red bunting at their hats. From the stern, a whaleboat was suspended, bottom down, and hanging captive from the bowsprit was seen the long lower jaw of the last whale they had slain. Signals, ensigns, and jacks of all colors were flying from her rigging on every side. Sideways, lashed in each of her three basketed tops, were 2 barrels of sperm, above which, in her topmast crosstrees, you saw slender breakers of the same precious fluid, and nailed to her main trunk was a brazen lamp. As was afterwards learned, the Bachelor had met with the most surprising success, all the more wonderful for that while cruising in the same seas, numerous other vessels had gone entire months without securing a single fish. Not only had barrels of beef and bread been given away to make room for the far more valuable sperm, but additional supplemental casks had been bartered for from the ships she'd met, and these were stowed along the deck and in the captain's and officers' staterooms. Even the cabin table itself had been knocked into kindling wood, and the cabin mess dined off the broad head of an oil butt, lashed down to the floor for a centerpiece. In the forecastle, the sailors had actually caulked and pitched their chests, and filled them. It was humorously added that the cook had clapped a head on his largest boiler and filled it, that the steward had plugged his spare coffee pot and filled it, that the harpooners had headed the sockets of their irons and filled them, that indeed everything was filled with sperm except the captain's pantaloons pockets and those he reserved to thrust his hands into, in self-complacent testimony of his entire satisfaction. As this glad ship of good luck bore down upon the moody Pequod, the barbarian sound of enormous drums came from her forecastle, and drawing still nearer, a crowd of her men were seen standing around her huge trypots, which, covered with parchment-like poke or stomach skin of the blackfish, gave forth a loud roar to every stroke of the clenched hands of the crew. On the quarterdeck, the mates and harpooners were dancing with the olive-hued girls who had eloped with them from the Polynesian Isles, while suspended in an ornamental boat firmly secured aloft between the foremast and the mainmast, 3 Long Island Negroes with glittering fiddle bows of whale ivory were presiding over the hilarious jig. Meanwhile, others of the ship's company were tumultuously busy at the masonry of the try-works, from which the huge pots had been removed. You would have almost thought they were pulling down the cursed Bastille, such wild cries they raised, as the now useless brick and mortar were being hurled into the sea. Lord and master over all this scene, the captain stood erect on the ship's elevated quarterdeck, so that the whole rejoicing drama was full before him, and seemed merely contrived for his own individual diversion. And Ahab, he too was standing on his quarterdeck, shaggy and black with a stubborn gloom, and as the 2 ships crossed each other's wakes, one all jubilations for things past, the other all forebodings as to things to come, their 2 captains in themselves impersonated the whole striking contrast of the scene. Come aboard, cried the gay Bachelor's commander, lifting a glass and a bottle in the air. Hast seen the white whale? Gritted Ahab in reply. No, only heard of him, but don't believe in him at all, said the other good-humoredly. Come aboard. Thou art too damned jolly. Sail on. Hast lost any men? Not enough to speak of. 2 islanders, that's all. But come aboard, old hearty, come aboard. I'll soon take that black from your brow. Come along, will ye? Merry's the play. A full ship and homeward bound. How wondrous familiar is a fool, muttered Ahab. Then aloud, Thou art a full ship and homeward bound, thou sayest. Well then, call me an empty ship and outward bound. So go thy ways and I will mine. Forward there, set all sail and keep her to the wind. And thus, while the one ship went cheerily before the breeze, the other stubbornly fought against it, and so the 2 vessels parted, the crew of the Pequod looking with grave, lingering glances toward the receding Bachelor, but the Bachelor's men never heeding their gaze for the lively revelry they were in. And as Ahab, leaning over the taffrail, eyed the homeward-bound craft, he took from his pocket a small vial of sand, and then looking from the ship to the vial, seemed thereby bringing 2 remote associations together, for that vial was filled with Nantucket soundings.
Chapter 1:16. The Dying Whale. Not seldom in this life, when on the right side fortune's favorites sail close by us, we, though all adroop before, catch somewhat of the rushing breeze and joyfully feel our bagging sails fill out. So it seemed with the Pequod. For the next day, after encountering the gay Bachelor, whales were seen, and 4 were slain, and one of them by Ahab. It was far down the afternoon, and when all the spearings of the crimson fight were done, and floating in the lovely sunset sea and sky, sun and whale both stilly died together. Then such a sweetness and such a plaintiveness, such enwreathing orisons curled up in that rosy air, that it almost seemed as if far over from the green, deep green convent of valleys of the Manila Isles, the Spanish land breeze, the wantonly turned sailor, had gone to sea, freighted with these vesper hymns. Soothed again,
but only soothed to deeper gloom. Ahab, who had sterned off from the whale, sat intently, watching his final wanings from the now tranquil boat. For that strange spectacle observable in all sperm whales dying, the turning sunward of the head, and so expiring. That strange spectacle beheld of such a placid evening, somehow to Ahab conveyed a wondrousness unknown before. He turns him to it, how slowly, but how steadfastly his homage rendering and invoking brow, with his last dying motions. He too worships fire, most faithful, broad, baronial vassal of the sun. Oh, that these two favoring eyes should see these two favoring sights. Look here, far waterlocked, beyond all hum of human weal or woe, in these most candid and impartial seas, where to traditions no rock furnished tablets, where for long Chinese ages the billows have still rolled on, speechless and unspoken to, as stars that shine upon the Niger's unknown source. Here, too, life dies sunward, full of faith. But see, no sooner dead than death whirls round the corpse, and it heads some other way. O thou dark Hindu half of nature, who of drowned bones hast builded thy separate throne somewhere in the heart of these unverdured seas. Thou art an infidel, thou queen, and too truly speakest to me in the wide slaughtering typhoon and the hushed burial of its after calm. Nor has this thy whale sunwards turned his dying head, and then gone round again, without a reason, a lesson to me. O trebly hooped and welded hip of power, O high aspiring rainbowed jet, that one striveth, this one jetteth all in vain. In vain, O whale, dost thou seek intercedings with yon all-quickening sun, that only calls forth life, but gives it not again. Yet dost thou, darker half, rock me with a prouder, if a darker faith. All thy unnameable interminglings float beneath me here. I am buoyed by breaths of once living things, exhaled as air, but water now. Then hail forever, hail, O sea, in whose eternal tossings the wild fowl finds his only rest. Born of earth, yet suckled by the sea. Though hill and valley mothered me, ye billows are my foster brothers.
Chapter 117, The Whale Watch. The 4 whales slain that evening had died wide apart, one far to windward, one less distant to leeward, one ahead, one astern. These last 3 were brought alongside ere nightfall, but the windward one could not be reached till morning, and the boat that had killed it lay by its side all night, and that boat was Ahab's. The wave pole was thrust upright into the dead whale's spout hole, and the lantern hanging from its top cast a troubled, flickering glare upon the black, glossy back, and far out upon the midnight waves which gently chafed the whale's broad flank like soft surf upon a beach. Ahab and all his boat's crew seemed asleep but the Parsee, who, crouching in the bow, sat watching the sharks, spectrally played around the whale and tapped the light cedar planks with their tails. A sound like the moaning in squadrons over asphalt heights of unforgiven ghosts of Gomorrah ran shuddering through the air. Started by his slumbers, Ahab face to face saw the Parsee, and hooped round by the gloom of night, they seemed the last men in a flooded world. "I've dreamed it again," said he. "Of the hearses, have I not said, old man, that neither hearse nor coffin can be thine? And who are hearsed that die on the sea? But I said, old man, that ere thou couldst die on this voyage, 2 hearses must verily be seen by thee on the sea, the first not made by mortal hands, and the visible wood of the last one must be grown in America." Aye, aye, a strange sight that, Parsi, a hearse and its plumes floating over the ocean with the waves for the pallbearers. Ha! Such a sight we shall not soon see. Believe it or not, thou canst not die till it be seen, old man. And what was that saying about thyself? Though it come to the last, I shall still go before thee, thy pilot. And when thou art so gone before, if that ever befall, then ere I can follow, thou must still appear to me, to pilot me still? Was it not so? Well then, did I believe all ye say, O my pilot? I have here 2 pledges, yet I shall yet slay Moby-Dick and survive it. Take another pledge, old man, said the Parsi, as his eyes lighted up fireflies in the gloom. Hemp only can kill thee. The gallows, ye mean? I am immortal then, on land and on sea, cried Ahab with a laugh of derision. Immortal on land and on sea. Both were silent again as one man. The gray dawn came on, and the slumbering crew arose from the boat's bottom, and ere noon the dead whale was brought to the ship.
Chapter 118. The Quadrant. The season for the line at length drew near, and every day when Ahab, coming from his cabin, cast his eyes aloft, the vigilant helmsman would ostentatiously handle his spokes, and the eager mariners quickly run to the braces, and would stand there with all their eyes centrally fixed on the nailed doubloon, impatient for the order to point the ship's prow for the equator. In good time the order came. It was hard upon high noon, and Ahab, seated in the bows of his high-hoisted boat, was about taking his wonted daily observation of the sun to determine his latitude. Now in that Japanese sea, the days in summer are as freshets of effulgences. That unblinkingly vivid Japanese sun seems the blazing focus of the glassy ocean's immeasurable burning glass. The sky looks lacquered. Clouds there are none. The horizon floats, and this nakedness of unrelieved radiance is as the insufferable splendors of God's throne. Well, that Ahab's quadrant was furnished with colored glasses through which to take sight of that solar fire. So, swinging his seated form to the roll of the ship, and with his astrological looking instrument placed to his eye, he remained in that posture for some moments to catch the precise instant when the sun should gain its precise meridian. Meantime, while his whole attention was absorbed, the Parsi was kneeling beneath him on the ship's deck, and with face thrown up like Ahab's, was eyeing the same sun with him, only the lids of his eyes half hooded their orbs, and his wild face was subdued to an earthly passionlessness. At length the desired observation was taken, and with his pencil upon his ivory leg, Ahab soon calculated what his latitude must be at that precise instant. Then falling into a moment's reverie, he again looked up toward the sun, and murmured to himself, "Thou sea mark, thou high and mighty pilot, thou tellest me truly where I am, but canst thou cast the least hint where I shall be? Or canst thou tell where some other thing besides me is this moment living? Where is Moby-Dick? This instant thou must be eyeing him. These eyes of mine look into the very eye that is even now beholding him, aye, and into the eye that is even now equally beholding the objects on the unknown thither side of thee, thou sun." Then gazing at his quadrant, and handling one after the other its numerous cabalistical contrivances, he pondered again and muttered, "Foolish toy! Baby's plaything of haughty admirals and commodores and captains, the world brags of thee, of thy cunning and might, but what after all canst thou do but tell the poor pitiful point where thou thyself happenest to be on this wide planet, and the hand that holds thee? No, not one jot more. Thou canst not tell where one drop of water or one grain of sand will be tomorrow noon, and yet with thy impotence thou insultest the sun. Science! Curse thee, thou vain toy, and cursed be all the things that cast man's eyes aloft to that heaven whose live vividness but scorches him, as these old eyes are even now scorched with thy light, O sun. Level by nature to this earth's horizon are the glances of man's eyes, not shot from the crown of his head, as if God had meant him to gaze on his firmament. Curse thee, thou quadrant!" dashing it to the deck. "No longer will I guide my earthly way by thee. The level ship's compass and the level dead reckoning, by log and by line, these shall conduct me and show me my place on the sea. Aye, lighting from the boat to the deck. Thus I trample on thee, thou paltry thing that feebly pointest on high. Thus I split and destroy thee. As the frantic old man thus spoke, and thus trampled with his live and dead feet, a sneering triumph that seemed meant for Ahab, and a fatalistic despair that seemed meant for himself, these passed over the mute, motionless Parsee's face. Unobserved he rose and glided away, while, awestruck by the aspect of their commander, the seamen clustered together on the forecastle, till Ahab, troubledly pacing the deck, shouted out, "To the braces! Up helm! Square in!" In an instant the yards swung round, and as the ship half-wheeled upon her heel, her three firm-seated graceful masts, erectly poised upon her long-ribbed hull, seemed as the three Horati pirouetting on one sufficient steed. Standing between the knightheads, Starbuck watched the Pequod's tumultuous way, and Ahab's also, as he went lurching along the deck. I have sat before the dense coal fire and watched it all aglow, full of its tormented flaming life, and I have seen it wane at last, down to the dumbest dust. Old man of oceans, of all this fiery life of thine, what will at length remain but one little heap of ashes? Aye, cried Stubb, but sea coal ashes, mind ye that, Mr. Starbuck, sea coal, not your common charcoal. Well, I heard Ahab mutter, here someone thrusts these cards into these old hands of mine, swears that I must play them and no others. And damn me, Ahab, but thou actest right. Live in the game and die in it.
Chapter 119, The Candles. Warmest climes but nurse the cruelest fangs. The tiger of Bengal crouches in spaced groves of ceaseless verdure. Skies the most effulgent but bask at the deadliest thunders. Gorgeous Cuba knows tornadoes and never swept tame northern lands. So too it is that in these resplendent Japanese seas, the mariner encounters the direst of all storms, the typhoon. It will sometimes burst from out that cloudless sky like an exploding bomb upon a dazed and sleepy town. Towards evening of that day, the Pequod was torn of her canvas, and bare-poled was left to fight a typhoon which had struck her directly ahead. When darkness came on, sky and sea roared and split with the thunder and blazed with the lightning that showed the disabled mast fluttering here and there, with the rags which the first fury of the tempest had left for its aftersport. Holding by a shroud, Starbuck was standing on the quarterdeck, at every flash of the lightning glancing aloft to see what additional disaster might have befallen the intricate hamper there, while Stubb and Flask were directing the men in the higher hoisting and firmer lashing of the boats. But all their pains seemed not. Though lifted to the very top of the cranes, the windward quarter-boat, Ahab's, did not escape. A great rolling sea, dashing high up against the reeling ship's high-teetering side, stove in the boat's bottom at the stern and left it again, all dripping through like a sieve.
Bad work, Mr. Starbuck,
said Stubb, regarding the wreck.
But the sea will have its way. Stubb, for one, can't fight it. You see, Mr. Starbuck, a wave has such a great long start before it leaves. All round the world it runs, and then comes the spring. But as for me, all the start I have to meet it is just across the deck here. But never mind, it's all in fun, so the old song says. Oh, jolly is the gale, and a joker is the whale, a flourishing his tail, such a funny, sporty, gamey, jesty, jokey, hokey, pokey lad is the ocean, oh, the scud all a-flying, that's his flip only a foamin', when he stirs in the spicin', such a funny, sporty, gamey, jesty, jokey, hokey, pokey lad is the ocean, oh. Thunder splits the ships, but he only smacks his lips, a tastin' of this flip, such a funny, sporty, gamey, jesty, jokey, hokey, pokey lad is the ocean, oh.
Avast, Stubb, cried Starbuck. Let the typhoon sing, and strike his harp here in our rigging, but if thou art a brave man, thou wilt hold thy peace.
But I am not a brave man. Never said I was a brave man. I am a coward, and I sing to keep up my spirits. And I tell you what it is, Mr. Starbuck, there's no way to stop my singing in this world but to cut my throat. And when that's done, 10 to 1, I sing you the doxology for a wind-up.
Madman! Look through my eyes if thou hast none of thine own.
What? How can you see better of a dark night than anybody else? Never mind how foolish.
Here, cried Starbuck, seizing Stubb by the shoulder and pointing his hand towards the weather bow. Markest thou not that the gale comes from the eastward, the very course Ahab is to run for Moby-Dick, the very course he swung to this day noon? Now mark his boat there. Where is that stove? In the stern sheets, man, where he is wont to stand. His standpoint is stove, man. Now jump overboard and sing away, if thou must.
I don't half understand ye. What's in the wind?
Yes, yes, round the Cape of Good Hope is the shortest way to Nantucket, soliloquized Starbuck suddenly, heedless of Stubb's question. The gale that now hammers at us to stave us, we can turn it into a fair wind that will drive us towards home. Yonder, to windward, all is blackness of doom, but to leeward, homeward, I see it lightens up there, but not with the lightning. At that moment, in one of the intervals of profound darkness, following the flashes, a voice was heard at his side, and almost at the same instant, a volley of thunder peals rolled overhead. Who's there?
Old Thunder,
said Ahab, groping his way along the bulwarks to his pivot hole, but suddenly finding his path made plain to him by elbowed lances of fire. Now, as the lightning rod to a spire on shore is intended to carry off the perilous fluid into the soil, so the kindred rod which at sea some ships carried to each mast is intended to conduct it into the water. But as this conductor must descend to considerable depth, that its end may avoid all contact with the hull, and as, moreover, if kept constantly towing there, it would be liable to many mishaps, besides interfering not a little with some of the rigging, and more or less impeding the vessel's way in the water. Because of all of this, the lower parts of a ship's lightning rods are not always overboard, but are generally made in long, slender links, so as to be the more readily hauled up into the chains outside, or thrown down into the sea, as occasion may require. The rods! The rods! Cried Starbuck to the crew, suddenly admonished to vigilance by the vivid lightning that had just been darting flambeau, to light Ahab to his post. Are they overboard? Drop them over, fore and aft, quick!
Avast! Cried Ahab. Let's have fair play here, though we be the weaker side. Yet I'll contribute to raise rods on the Himalayas and the Andes, that all the world may be secured, but out on privileges. Let them be, sir.
Look aloft, cried Starbuck. The corpusants! The corpusants! All the yardarms were tipped with a pallid fire, and touched at each tri-pointed lightning rod end with 3 tapering white flames. Each of the 3 tall masts was silently burning in that sulphurous air, like 3 gigantic wax tapers before an altar.
Blast the boat! Let it go!
Cried Stubb at this instant, as a swashing sea heaved up under his own little craft, so that its gunwale violently jammed his hand as he was passing a lashing.
Blast it!
But slipping backward on the deck, his uplifted eyes caught the flames, and immediately shifting his tone, he cried,
The corpusants, have mercy on us all!
To sailors, oaths are household words. They will swear in the trance of the calm, and in the teeth of the tempest. They will imprecate curses from the topsail yardarms when most they teeter over to a seething sea. But in all my voyaging, seldom have I heard a common oath when God's burning finger has been laid on the ship, when his mene mene tekel upharsan has been woven into the shrouds and the cordage. While this pallidness was burning aloft, few words were heard from the enchanted crew, who in one thick cluster stood on the forecastle, all their eyes gleaming in that pale phosphorescence, like a faraway constellation of stars. Relieved against the ghostly light, that gigantic jet negro, Daggoo, loomed up to thrice his real stature, and seemed the black cloud from which the thunder had come. The parted mouth of Tashtigo revealed his sharp white teeth, which strangely gleamed as if they too had been tipped by corpusants, while lit up by the preternatural light, Queequeg's tattooing burned like satanic blue flames on his body. The tableau all waned at last, with the pallidness aloft, and once more the Pequod and every soul on her decks were wrapped in a pall. A moment or two passed, when Starbuck, going forward, pushed against someone. It was Stubb. What thinkest thou, man? I heard thy cry. It was not the same in the song.
No, it wasn't. I said the corpusants have mercy on us all, and I hope they will, still. But do they have mercy on long faces? Have they no bowels for a laugh? And look ye, Mr. Starbuck, but it's too dark to look. Hear me. Then I take that masthead flame we saw for a sign of good luck, for those masts are rooted in a hold what is going to be chock-a-block with sperm oil. D'ye see? And so all that sperm will wake work its way into the mast like sap in a tree. Yes, our 3 masts will be as 3 spermaceti candles. That's the good promise we saw.
At that moment, Starbuck caught sight of Stubbs' face, slowly beginning to glimmer into sight. Glancing upward, he cried, "See, see!" And once more the high tapering flames were beheld with what seemed redoubled supernaturalness in their pallor.
The corpusants, have mercy on us all!
Cried Stubb again. At the base of the mainmast, full beneath the doubloon and the flame, the Parsee was kneeling in Ahab's front, but with his head bowed away from him, while nearby, from the arched and overhanging rigging, where they had just been engaged securing a spar, a number of the seamen, arrested by the glare, now cohered together, and hung pendulous like a knot of numbed wasps from a drooping orchard twig. In various enchanted attitudes, like the standing or stepping or running skeletons in Herculaneum, others remained rooted to the deck, but all their eyes upcast.
Aye, aye, men, cried Ahab. Look up at it. Mark it well. The white flame but lights the way to the white whale. Hand me those mainmast links there. I would fain feel this pulse, and let mine beat against it. Blood against fire. So.
Then turning, the last link held fast in his left hand, he put his foot upon the Parsee, and with fixed upward eve and high-flung right arm, he stood erect before the lofty tri-pointed trinity of flames.
O thou clear spirit of clear fire, whom on these seas I as Persian once did worship, till in the sacramental act so burned by thee, that to this hour I bear the scar. I now know thee, thou clear spirit, and I know that thy right worship is defiance. To neither love nor reverence wilt thou be kind, and even for hate thou canst but kill. And all are killed. No fearless fool now fronts thee. I own thy speechless, placeless power, but to the last gasp of my earthquake life will dispute unconditional, unintegral mastery in me. In the midst of the personified impersonal, a personality stands here, though but a point at best, whensoe'er I came, wheresoe'er I go. Yet while I earthly live, the queenly personality lives in me and feels her royal rights. But war is pain, and hate is woe. Come in thy lowest form of love, and I will kneel and kiss thee. But at thy highest, come as mere supernal power. And though thou launchest navies of full-freighted worlds, there's that in here that still remains indifferent. O thou clear spirit, of thy fire thou madest me, and like a true child of fire, I breathe it back at thee.
Sudden, repeated flashes of lightning. The 9 flames leap lengthwise to thrice their previous height. Ahab, with the rest, closes his eyes, his right hand pressed hard upon them.
I own thy speechless, placeless power. Said I not so? Nor was it wrung from me, nor do I now drop these links. Thou canst blind, but I can then grope. Thou canst consume, but I can then be ashes. Take the homage of these poor eyes and shuttered hands. I would not take it. The lightning flashes through my skull, mine eyeballs ache and ache. My whole beaten brain seems as beheaded and rolling in some stunning ground. Oh, oh! Yet blindfold will I talk to thee. Light though thou be, thou leapest out of darkness, but I am darkness leaping out of light, leaping out of thee. The javelins cease. Open eyes, see or not, there burn the flames. O thou magnanimous! Now I do glory in my genealogy. But thou art but my fiery father, my sweet mother, I know not. O cruel! What hast thou done with her? There lies my puzzle, but thine is greater. Thou knowest not how came you, hence callest thyself unbegotten. Certainly knowest not thy beginning, hence callest thyself unbegun. I know that of me, which thou knowest not of thyself, O thou omnipotent. There is some unsuffusing thing beyond thee, thou clear spirit, to whom all thy eternity is but time, all thy creativeness mechanical. Through thee, thy flaming self, my scorched eyes do dimly see it. O thou foundling fire, thou hermit immemorial, thou too hast thy incommunicable riddle, thy unparticipated grief. Here again with haughty agony I read my sire. Leap, leap up, and look the sky. I leap with thee, I burn with thee, would fain be welded with thee. Defyingly I worship thee.
The boat, cried Starbuck. Look at thy boat, old man. Ahab's harpoon, the one forged at Perth's fire, remained firmly lashed in its conspicuous crotch, so that it projected beyond his whaleboat's bow, but the sea that had stove its bottom had caused the loose leather sheath to drop off, and from the keen steel barb there now came a leveled flame of pale forked fire. As the silent harpoon burned there like a serpent's tongue, Starbuck grasped Ahab by the arm. God is against thee, old man. Forbear. 'Tis an ill voyage, ill begun, ill continued. Let me square the yards while we may, old man, and make a fair wind of it homewards to go on a better voyage than this. Overhearing Starbuck, the panic-stricken crew instantly ran to the braces, though not a sail was left aloft. For the moment, all the aghast mates' thoughts seemed theirs. They raised a half-mutinous cry. But dashing the rattling lightning links to the deck and snatching the burning harpoon, Ahab waved it like a torch among them, swearing to transfix with it the first sailor that but cast loose a rope's end. Petrified by his aspect, and still more shrinking from the fiery dart that he held, the men fell back in dismay, and Ahab again spoke.
All your oaths to hunt the white whale are as binding as mine, and heart, soul, and body, lungs and life, old Ahab is bound. And that ye may know to what tune this heart beats, look ye here, thus I blow out the last fear.
And with one blast of his breath he extinguished the flame. As in the hurricane that sweeps the plain, men fly the neighborhood of some lone gigantic elm, those whose very height and strength but render it so much the more unsafe, because so much the more a mark for thunderbolts. So at those last words of Ahab's, many of the mariners did run from him in a terror of despair.